Welcome to a football show, Monday edition. That is Paul Kuharsky. I am Braden Gall, of course, back home in Nashville, Tennessee. Brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. PK, how are you? How was the trip home?
Well, trip home was fine. I'm a little migrainey, but fighting through.
It's a young man's game covering the NFL Combine. It's a young man's game. Lots of stuff to get to today on the show. What did we change our mind about as it pertains to the Titans draft strategy, the Combine? Is there anything we thought going up to Indianapolis that we now feel differently about? I know you've got some thoughts. I've got some thoughts. A lot of that will revolve around the quarterback situation, so we'll get to that today on the show. Lots of stuff as it pertains to the free agent market as well as the draft market. Of course, we've got Harold Landry news you and I have not yet talked about, as well as Abdul Carter takes. We've got some Abdul Carter takes as well. The value of the number one pick. What did we learn about the trades that could be happening or could be under negotiations right now across the league in the top 10. We'll get into that. I caught up with ESPN reporter Jeremy Fowler, and I want to play a clip of that conversation. The rest of the interview you can hear either on Lamestream Sports podcast feed, or you can catch the entire video on the 440 Sports YouTube page. But there's one clip where he talks about sort of the perception of the organization from outside, and it sort of rings very true to me because it's the answer I'm getting from everybody when I ask about the perception of the Tennessee Titans. So we'll play that for you a little bit later on. And then a Titans radio update in terms of replacing Mike Keith a little bit later on as well. So lots of stuff to get to today. Obviously, we are not live right now because Paul and I are currently, I'm not sure, walking through the new Titan Stadium. So we'll have a lot of stuff, I'm assuming, paulkuharsky.com. You'll have a lot of stuff for the good folks there, as well as the Paul Kuharsky podcast. And I'll have some stuff for you guys on Thursday, some visuals you can take a look at as the press corps is getting to tour, I think, one of 3 different time slots on Monday to kind of walk through the new stadium. So we are not live. Also, that's a good opportunity for me to tell you guys, now that you no longer are racing all over town to talk to coordinators and players, we're going to move back to our normal 1 o'clock Central Standard God's time start on Monday. So PK and I on a football show Mondays at 1 o'clock, back to the normal original time, the off-season scheduled time. So a little bit earlier in the day on Monday. So set those notifications. If you're watching on YouTube, turn that all on. If you're listening to us on the podcast app, we do appreciate you guys for doing that. 5 stars, of course. Write the review. It does help people find us. And go subscribe to paulkuharsky.com.
And if I'm not mistaken, we are within days of returning to daylight savings time. That is Saturday night, Sunday morning. God bless it. And please take me seriously when you say you don't let people love daylight savings time. They incorrectly say they hate daylight savings time. Think of the words. You like daylight. So when you say you hate daylight savings time, you're misspeaking. Just consider the words. You hate a lack of daylight. Therefore, you love daylight savings time. You might dislike losing an hour. It's really not that big a deal to lose an hour, spring ahead, fall back.
You have an older child. Speak for yourself.
Listen, springing ahead is it's 1 hour, and it might throw off sleep schedules and everything. But then your children get to play in the daylight beyond 5:30, which is a joyous thing. Agreed. For everyone. And I don't care if kids are waiting at the bus stops in pitch black. Give them miners' helmets. We need light in the evening. I've been a proponent of this for years. Don't confuse yourself and say you don't like daylight savings. I've not yet to meet a person that actually doesn't like daylight savings. They just don't understand the language somehow.
Well, what's interesting is the change itself is actually a big part of the problem, because elderly folk and young kids have a tougher time adjusting, especially walking around neighborhoods and driving at night. So when it's darker earlier, to your point, that's a problem. The United States Congress, which is one of the most efficient bodies and entities in the entire country, is actively working on this. So they tell us.
Turning it the correct way or turning it the wrong way?
Well, and this is
because I don't think they understand the language either.
I know way too much about this, Paul. This is bad. And it sounds like you're in on it too. Each state is in a different portion of each time zone, and so it should be up to the states to decide which time zone they want to be.
Every time they want to come to the states, it's trouble. Not that the federal government is doing good things.
But you can't have New York City and Michigan on the same time zone. Like, Michigan should decide what it wants to be, which should be daylight savings, and New York can handle its own time zone. It's its own time slot. So it is way more complicated than you realize, but it is, I agree, more daylight equals good.
More daylight in the evening. You're taking away daylight from the morning. We can all recognize that.
Well, but by the time you get to July, though, it's the longest, there's more sunlight all around. So either way, I agree. I did not realize that's this weekend. And of course, we got forced family vacation next week with spring break for the kids. So that I'm sure that'll be wonderful travel for the kids, losing an hour's sleep on Saturday night.
And it's opening day today in high school baseball. So we're getting that going. So less lights and more daylight.
Yes, soccer practice will get much easier when we get back from spring break because there will actually be daylight that we can practice under. That is for sure. Softball practice for the girls got started on Saturday, so we're two sporting it this spring for the first time. So going to be very interesting. Sinkers Beverages, and of course also Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. But make sure you swing by Sinkers Beverages. 40 years. They're celebrating their 40th birthday this year. 40 years of serving the local community. So make sure you check them out. Join the in crowd for all your good, high quality bourbon needs. They've got one of the best bourbon allocations that you can get anywhere in the city because they are a great supplier to all the big bourbon distilleries in Kentucky. They get great access, which means they're going to have better products and more to offer you, harder stuff to find. So even if you're listening in a different area of the town and you don't normally get over there, swing by Sinkers Beverages, sign up for the in-crowd. I promise you it's worth a little bit of an extra drive to go get there. If you like bourbon like I do, really high-quality stuff, so go check that out. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday until that meat is gone. Best brisket in the city. Go check it out. Okay. Let's start. I want to start broadly here because I know we're going to get into the quarterbacks to start. But let's start with what changed. And I think both of our answers might be tied directly into the quarterbacks. In general, both free agents and draft class and the Titans situation. What was the biggest adjustment from your perspective going into Indianapolis that you felt a certain way about a certain thing, and now coming out of Indianapolis, maybe you've adjusted the way you've been thinking about it?
Well, I thought there were some legitimate free agent options at quarterback that have shriveled up based on what teams said at the Combine. Derek Carr is staying with the Saints. Kirk Cousins, to hear them tell it, is going to be a very expensive backup to Michael Penix. Matthew Stafford re-signed with the Rams. And Titans have no interest in Aaron Rodgers, who could be going to the Giants. Titans fans should be rooting against that. That shrivels things up. You're talking about Jameis Winston. You're talking about Mac Jones. You're talking about real stopgap types. I'm about to have a connection.
Yeah, I'll take care of it here. I agree. I will push back on one tiny tidbit there, because I talked to some folks around the Atlanta Falcons, and they are operating in the belief that Kirk Cousins will not be on the team. This is all sort of to see what they can get for him, sort of like Harold Landry to some degree, but that there's a cut down date where they can cut him for a lot less money. And so I think a lot of folks around the Atlanta Falcons are operating under the assumption that he will still become a free agent at some point. Or they're going to be trading him for some sort of a pseudo Russell Wilson, Broncos, Steelers kind of deal where they keep a lot of the money. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but I think there's a lot of folks around that team that are saying this is all lip service by Fontenot at the Combine.
Well, that'll be good. I mean, the more options there are in the market, but I think the Titans are either taking Cam Ward at 1 or winding up with a more stopgappy solution than we thought were amongst the possibilities for them in free agency. And I'm thinking of guys like Mac Jones or Jameis Winston, who would be competing with Will Levis. And I think it would wind up a season being where you would see a Mac Jones or a Jameis Winston with a decent share of starts, and probably with Will Levis with a decent share of starts, out of neither of them being fantastic. I mean, if you're looking at Mac Jones, then we're going to be talking about arm strength issues all year. And if you're looking at Jameis Winston, you're going to be talking about turnovers all year. Now, the guy can throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns on any given Sunday, but he also throw for 4 interceptions on any given Sunday. So it's a real roller coaster ride with him. And going with one of those guys, they're going to address a significant things on other parts of the roster, which is a mess.
By the way, thoroughly entertaining to cover would be Jameis Winston.
I think he's highly overrated as thoroughly entertaining. I think a guy talking a lot of nonsense is not entertaining. It's brain twisting to me. And the guy doesn't make sense. He says a lot of crazy, nonsensical things. People are like, ooh, that's fascinating and that's interesting. I think, ooh, that's illogical and doesn't make sense and is annoying. So I'm on the other side of the fence on that. I'd much prefer a guy who's well thought out and unguarded than a guy who's eating W's and being frantic and crazy. And that's what Jameis Winston is. So this migraine I have right now would be a regular feature.
He gets clicks, PK. He gets clicks. No, look, I actually agree with you almost entirely. The one thing that I don't necessarily, I wouldn't call this sort of like me changing my opinion on it, but I had sort of felt this way, but I felt like I confirmed this. I feel very convicted about this. And that is that the gap between Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward is fairly large. That I think there might have been a chance that if Shedeur Sanders had a great week and Cam Ward had a bad week, or something happens behind the scenes, or there's some medical issue or something, maybe we come out of this week with two guys that appear to be dead even. I do not think that's the case.
Ward was more sophisticated in his meeting with the Titans and impressed them far more than Sanders did.
I think he's a more physically gifted player. He's a bigger player, has a better arm, and to your point, I think is a little bit more, I don't want to say buttoned up. That's not the right word, because Shedeur has a ton of talent, but he's just a little bit more locked in. And I think the Titans, for better or for worse, PK, you know this, you've been around it a long time. For better or for worse, they're a little bit more of a buttoned up, shirt tucked in type of team. And that's not necessarily the way Shedeur and that family operates. And so that may be a bad thing that they eliminate him. I think on talent alone, Cam Ward has separated himself from Shedeur Sanders. I do not think Shedeur is an option at 1. I think Cam Ward is the only option at 1 if you're going to take a quarterback. I agree with you. And then I think I also agree with you that a stopgap is what's left on the table mostly for them. Here's my question, though. Is it all that terrible if you are going to try to rebuild the rest of the roster and play the stopgap game, Mac Jones, Jameis Winston? Is that the worst thing you could do big picture for your franchise? I mean, maybe it's terrible for Brian Callahan's job, but being a top 5 pick again, and if you trade back and you get another first-round pick, and all of a sudden you got 2 top 15 picks next year, you could do a lot worse things to build your team than that.
Yeah. No, I don't like the perception or the way people take it, like from the beginning, that they're tanking. They're certainly not intentionally trying to lose. I mean, if you have 2 firsts, that's great. And if you're getting the first from another team that maybe is overly banking on Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, and you're right about them not being great, particularly out of the gate, that would be a favorable pick for you, be it from the Giants, the Jets, the Raiders. I don't think any of those teams are going to be getting substantially better. You would be in a good position to pick a quarterback next year and hopefully have, extended your roster significantly. I did get the idea from the Titans that they do understand that expectations, the third year, so to speak, of this post-Vrabel era, expectations would reasonably be higher, and they would expect them to be higher. They would have expectations of themselves higher. And so, in that regard, like as part of their growth process and having decided not to go quarterback this year, yes, in terms of listening to fans say, oh, they're tanking it from the start, incredibly annoying and inaccurate.
Agree with that. Nick Suss, of course, of the Tennessee, and talked to Chad Brinker. We talked about it on Friday's episode of A Football Show, and that is the two things are that, well, the number one thing is that Chad Brinker did sort of acknowledge that, look, I don't like to use the word rebuild, but we are in a rebuild. We have to be honest about where we are as a roster. Mike Borgonzi sort of echoed those sentiments when he took over a couple of months ago, and it is, while it feels like a very small thing for a team to do, it does communications with the fans are important, and it does sort of set an expectation, and they're being very clear with that this team has a lot of work to do. Like, they're being very clear about it, and I don't think it's, you've said, look, they should expect to show improvement, 3 wins, 4 wins, whatever it might be. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure about that, depending on what they do in free agency.
Well, I mean, I think they have to show some level of improvement. I think, some things very much didn't go their way last year of their own doing. I mean, they were playing a quarterback who makes bad decisions and throws underhanded interceptions or forward or fumbles or, can't throw the ball away out of bounds and hands away pick sixes and things like that at the beginning of the season that set a bad tone. They have far too many turnovers. I mean, Callahan was talking about this stuff, just self-improvement that doesn't have anything to do with the competition in terms of turnovers and penalties. And just right there, if you could improve yourself, you would think there'd be two more wins out of playing
Probably
cleaner. That get you to 5. I would expect them to be more in the 6 or 7 range if they do a good job getting better people, playing better defense, playing better special teams, which I think Fossil will help them do, and they'll have a better back end of the roster with him helping them choose. And Borgonzi, I think, understanding in a way that Rand Carthon didn't, the importance of those people that Callahan and certainly Rand Carthon did not in the first half of the season value that killed them in terms of coverage and field position. So those things alone, I think, help them be a better team in small, less seen ways.
I remember Callahan saying that, and I thought, you and I have talked a lot about, if you expect a player to get better in his second year, it's reasonable to expect a GM or an assistant GM or a coach to get better in their first or second year. And I think hearing Callahan, I do like that he said it, where he's like, look, regardless of what we do in terms of talent and making the roster better, we need to be a cleaner football team that has learned from their mistakes. And it should be reasonable to expect that, especially considering the hilarious list of mistakes that you just rattled off that they should be avoiding this year, I suppose, unless you have Jameis Winston at quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, that just goes to show you, like, you could have the best intentions, and then the personnel wall might reach up and slap you in the face. But I do think they've got the best of intentions in terms of what they want to do. And I've said and will say, I think Callahan is a bright guy who will spend a lot of this offseason, already probably has and certainly will, breaking down his first year failures and looking to figure out how he can do a lot better. And he and his staff can do a lot better. And there were some staff adjustments. So we'll see the bearing, but obviously Bones Fassel brings huge expectations after 2 really not good special teams coaches and not enough of an emphasis on special teams players.
Is there, you wrote about this a little bit at paulkuharsky.com, sort of that the board is largely set in general, some small tweaks and small changes that Borgonzi and Callahan talked about at the combine. How do you feel about the top of the board in terms of adjustments that were made this week?
Yeah, this is really where the Cam Ward question, to me, like, come out of it thinking, well, it's hard for them not to take Ward, right? Given the need, you're up there and all of that. But where do we think Ward was for them? I mean, they could be downplaying it in a big way, right? But where do we think Ward was for them coming into this week? Was he at least 5th? Because Borgonzi's saying the moves out of the combine, out of pro days, out of everything are going to be small, very small. So very small, I take as like 5 max. So if he could move himself up 5 spots to get to 1, he had to be at least 5th going into this process. Do we think that they came into the combine thinking he was one of the 5 best players in this draft? I have trouble getting myself there. And that's why I still think it's most likely that they trade down and go a different direction. And I've got very strongly that they're not trading down unless they get a first-round pick in 2026 for it. And so if I could see the Browns saying, well, we're not giving up a first to go up 1 spot. And I could see the Giants teetering on that, though. If the Giants are in love, you pay the quarterback tax. But certainly if the Raiders are coming up or the Jets are coming up, they're giving up a first-round pick in 2026. and the Titans would be sacrificing a chance at Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. So who's next? If I'm guessing right now, if the Titans were to go to 6 or 7, if the Titans were going to go to 6 or 7 in exchange for getting a bigger trade package that included a number 1 pick in the 2026 draft, Mykel Williams is the guy there.
Yep. Completely agree. So a lot of stuff here brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Here's how I look at your first question about Cam Ward. Where is he on the board? I think there is a top tier of player on their board. I don't know who's on that tier. Common sense would say 2 players, Abdul Carter,
or how deep it goes.
Exactly right. Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are on the list. We know that for sure.
Absolutely.
The question is, in their minds, perception-wise, who else is on that list? And does that include, and how is that adjusted for need? In my perception, Ashton Genty is a top-tier prospect ahead of the quarterbacks. I think he might be number 3 on my board. But he's not a viable option for almost any team in that position in the draft. So the question is like the way I would describe it to people is I think Cam Ward is the top of their second tier. He's the number 1 player on their second tier. And this is all just me speculating here, of course. But that is my perception of this. Is their top tier 2 guys, which means Cam Ward's number 3? Is it 5 guys? Does it include Mykel Williams? Does it include Ashton Genty? Does it include Mason Graham? Does it include Will Johnson? I don't know. I think there are 2 guys above everybody else. I think Mykel Williams might be number 3. And the question is, who else is on that list? And does Cam Ward, I would view Cam Ward as like the best second tier option for them. That's not who you take at number 1. That's not what you do. And so again, if that guy's number 3 or 4, Cam Ward, can you move him up to 1 to take him because you think he's good enough? That fine. I don't have to agree with that, but I understand the logic of that decision. And then to your point about the trade value, if you move back to 2 or 3 Browns or Giants, you still give yourself a chance at Hunter or Carter, almost guaranteed, in which case you don't need the first round pick next year. And to get the deal done... Well,
you do if you're getting a quarterback next year. To maximize your chance of getting a quarterback next year.
Maybe, but if you're telling me this is what obviously the board matters here. If you are out on Sanders and Cam Ward, it doesn't matter. You trade down to 3 and you still take the guy you would have taken at 1 or one of the 2.
Get the best you can get.
And you get 2 extra 2s and a 3rd and a 4th. And that gets the deal done because you don't have to give up the first round pick if you're the Giants. And so after that, if you go down to 4, that's where I'm like, no, you got to get a first round pick. You go to 6 with the Raiders, 7 with the Jets, you got to get a first round pick.
Well, you're not dealing to 4. I mean, 4's got a quarterback. 4, you've got a sticky history. And 4's taking, presuming 2 quarterbacks are going in the 4's taking Travis Hunter or dealing out, I think. The Patriots.
I tend to agree. Would you care to comment on Mike Vrabel coming out of Twitter hibernation?
We were having a good time. He bought me a beer. He was amusing himself with an Ohio State guy and an all Patriots guy.
No all Titans fans there? Nobody dressed
He asked me if I would take a picture with the dude to be for a tweet. And I said only if I had some say so in the captioning. And
editorial control. You asked Mike Vrabel for editorial control,
and then we agreed there would be a degree of that, and so we had a good time with it.
All right.
So what did you think of the editorial control? I thought
it was good. I thought it was
pretty well. Yeah,
I think you did. The coach's kitchen is open a little bit later than the other places, so just want to point that out. So what's interesting?
It was not that late. It was not. It was like 1:30 ish.
Okay, folks. Come on in here. He just said it was not that late. And you said 1:30-ish.
Which is not that late in combine time. Coaches don't go out until 11. Their evenings are not over until 11. This is new to you because it was your first time. But the schedule is bad. You got to go home and catch some kind of nap on a reporter schedule. But I don't think coaches are starting out at 7 or 8 the way reporters are. And if they are, they have a different kind of constitution than we do.
They are not down in the convention center room doing podium availability for the players. No, they're not. They are sleeping.
I had a little bit of a snooze. Now, that was Thursday night, I think. But I was fine to get up Friday morning, but I had a little bit of a snooze issue. No, that was Saturday morning. Saturday morning, I had a little trouble getting up, but I was not out Friday night. But then I just bagged offensive linemen and I wrote. I had stories to write. And so I just wrote from the hotel room. I went to my breakfast place and I never made it to the convention center.
Look,
and that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, you had said this and a few other folks had said this, but I went anyway. I think it was Wednesday the first time they worked out, or maybe it was Thursday. I went and did the actual Lucas Oil event where I walked in and and I'm like,
and once was enough.
This is and it's not that it's not valuable to have everybody measured by the same tape, the same stopwatch on the same field at the same day, so that everybody gets uniformity when it comes to the measurements. I totally understand the value of that to a franchise. But you walk in and there's fans in there. They're not even broadcasting what the times are. This was during the defensive lineman running the 40 time. And I'm sitting here they're not even telling us who's running or what the times are. And I'm sitting here going, this is worthless to somebody who's trying to gain information about this and form opinions and report back to the fans. This is meaningless. I never went back. It was as worthless as I thought it was going to be watching it on TV for the last 20 years. Where I'm like, this is terrible.
Yet there's a bunch of big draft industrial complex there watching breathlessly, writing things down, pretending that they're getting major information from it. I watched some offensive linemen yesterday for maybe 45 minutes. And the biggest thing that I got was that they were slipping like crazy on the other drills. The lateral movement and stuff. I was like, all right, they're not wearing the great shoes for Lucas.
I saw a guy, PK. We were walking out after I was in there for 45 minutes. I was like, we're out of here, JT. Let's go. We walked out of there. TD was in there too, and he was like, man, it's better on TV. I was like, all right. I was like, thanks, TV. We're walking out, and there's a guy who goes running past me, not in the media, just a fan. God bless him. Of course, he's wearing a Green Bay Packers sweatshirt and
your
jeans.
people.
Yeah, exactly. He has the stopwatch around the neck. And I'm like, for what?
Because he's better than the electronic timer.
What are we doing? I just started laughing. I just wanted to be like, buddy, come here, bud. Come here, big guy. So anyway, it was alarmingly bad in terms of the value, which led me to my number one takeaway from the entire event, which I said to Nick on Friday. This is the way SEC Media Days is a largely meaningless event that is just a sort of a celebration of the SEC. It's sort of the unofficial kickoff of the season. It is a marketing tool. That's the way I felt about this. This is a PR tool by the NFL to introduce a new wave of talent to its fans all at one time in one place with a giant burst of information. And that if you're a diehard fan of the NFL, you this is exciting because you get this new crop of talent that's going to eventually be, many of whom will be stars in the NFL. But it is, to me, it's almost exclusively a marketing tool for the league, and it is brilliant.
The league, though, I would say is not careful enough about it. Fewer guys working out at the top. Quarterbacks did nothing. And coaches like McVay and Shanahan, who are two of the very best coaches in the league, don't come. Now they're going to take it someplace that's less convenient than Indianapolis. It's probably going to the Star in Dallas or to SoFi in Los Angeles. Both far less convenient. You're going to have to get in a car. You're not going to be able to walk around. And more coaches are going to not come. And more prospects are going to not work out. And they're going to kill an event that they've managed to turn into something. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the fan bases will come out more because it'll be more dressed up for the fan bases, but it'd be less of an event.
What was it? Oh, how many of the top 10 actually worked out? Projected ballpark top 10.
No, I don't know.
Didn't a bunch of the guys opt out? I mean, Abdul Carter obviously is not because of the injury. Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward,
So we're at 60% there, and
There you
go. Maybe one or two more. I don't know, but look, it's a measurement thing. And how about that? I mean, I included Jim Nagy in a tweet asking like why the measurements didn't match up to Senior Bowl measurements. And he said, I don't know why, because it's people from the same organization doing the measurements, not like so much height and weight. And weights, could have changed since then, but like wingspan and arm length are like a quarter inch or a half an inch different, which is preposterous.
We got to get laser measured arms now in the NFL draft. Great. Tremendous. So here's the thing. Do you have anything else you want to add on the value? Because we didn't spend a ton of time on it, but I want to make sure we kind of empty the notebook on the value of the first round of the first overall pick. I agree with you. It feels like the Titans are completely open for business, that they absolutely would love to make that trade. If it's 2 or 3, I think the cost is one thing. If it's 6 or 7 or later, the cost is another thing. And I agree with you that the Titans are fully – here's what I would say. The Titans are fully prepared to pick at 6 or 7.
I think more so than I thought going in. And I think everything they did, everything they said publicly – polished everybody up to make it look like they're interested. Come pry this pick from us, and we're expecting. We don't care the perceptions of this class. We're expecting number one value for number one pick.
Yeah. All right. Let's go Landry and Abdul Carter. Let's start with Harold Landry, and I know you wrote this because you talked to some folks about sort of the value of what he brings to the table. I know it's a few days now removed from all of this. It's not a surprise that the story broke when it did. It feels much like the Kirk Cousins situation. The last resort has always been for the Titans. Go out and find a trade partner for you. Could somebody spend a 6th or a 7th to have access to him fully? And then could there be a renegotiation? Like, how does that even work to make it worth somebody giving up assets to go get a player they can just go sign after June? Is that because of knowledge of the roster and sort of knowing what you got and how you got it? Or you can designate him a post June 1 cut anytime you want, right?
They don't need to do that. I mean, they cut him now. They saved this all 17.5. It doesn't change the, it might change the dead cap, but they're not in position that they're desperate for it. They'd be better off taking the full lump now. And none of that 17.5 base is guaranteed. So, I don't think they're getting anything for him, and they don't think they're getting anything for him. Now, if you did trade with the Giants at number 3, tossing him in there for Shane Bowen, sweeten the pot a tiny bit, but I don't think they want to inherit that contract. They'd be better off waiting for him to be cut if Shane Bowen still thinks he's got enough gas left in the tank. And look, the guy plays a ton of snaps. So he's got value in that regard. A change of scenery probably be good for him and all of that stuff. But I'm not surprised to see the Titans at this point. I think it's probably a little bit partly him ready for a change of scenery. With the season not having gone that well, his first year in the new regime and all of that. They approached him about a pay cut, and it was a complete non-starter. I reported that. Like they didn't even begin to have the conversation. They dipped their toe in the water, and it was a very quick no that got them to this go ahead and seek a trade. But if nothing comes to fruition with this trade thing, they're not in a hurry. They don't have to be in a hurry,
right?
To do anything. You'd like to help a guy get himself into the best situation, but you also don't have to sprint to do it. And look, everybody said, well, this really clarifies that they need an edge because without him, they've got nothing. Well, they didn't have to put anybody, allow anybody to go seek a trade at right tackle in order to be absolutely empty at right tackle. So it's kind of a silly thing, right?
The Adam Schefter reporting the Tennessee Titans have allowed NPF to pursue a trade.
Right. They're empty at right tackle without any moves like this. So I'm not a big proponent, as we know, of them drafting a right tackle in the first round. even after a trade down, because of how much draft capital they put there. I just think they need to put some draft capital somewhere else and find a tackle solution in free agency. And I think they're going to be heavily active in free agency, particularly on the offensive line. So I don't really think this changes that much. I think we're going to see multiple edge players added probably in the draft.
Really good offensive line depth right there around pick 30 to 50. A lot of good names, whether it's Josh Connerly, Ursulele, the kid out of Minnesota. You got a lot of good pieces there that could be available, whether they pick at 35 or trade down from that spot as well. If they add another pick, that's another luxury pick they could add there. I think doubling up on edge in the first 3 picks is not out of the question, assuming one of those picks is maybe in that third round-ish area. So we'll see about that. I agree. It's one of those rare situations, though, where it does feel like it's good for everyone. Like it's solid for the Titans and could be good for Harold Landry as well, who by and large has been a pretty productive member when healthy of the Titans. Not a great player, but a productive one. So,
well, I don't think it's good for them in that when you sign a second-round pick and he's only been in the league since 2018. It'd be great if he was still a big piece of your roster and worth 17.5.
Agreed.
Unfortunately, that's not the case.
7 years. It's also 2018 was way further ago than we think. 2018 sounds like it was like recent. 7 seasons.
Also, some people saying, well, still not back from the ACL. He's 2 years back from the ACL.
Yeah, he's fine.
The first year you give him grace and say, well, he's not going to be himself. This year he should have been back to himself, and he didn't, to me, show the burst that he showed when he was at his best. And the odds of that being on an incline now, though he's not super old, is not high.
To your point about the number of snaps he's played and the number of sacks he had, I think he was the lowest pressure rate of anybody with those types of numbers, snap count and sacks. His pressure rate was among the worst in the entire NFL of players that have those numbers. So
now everybody missed Danico Autry on that line, but T'Vondre Sweat was supposed to fortify that interior and really help everybody, and we didn't see that come to fruition.
All right, I want to get you to Abdul Carter in just a second, though. Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Sinkers Beverages, as I said, 40 years. Happy birthday, Sinkers Beverages. Liquor Store of the Year 4 times in a row, and, of course, Craft Beer Retailer of the Year in Nashville, Tennessee. The beer fridge is real and spectacular, so go check it out. But also, if you're listening on the north side of town, Bluegrass Beverages, over 50 years of serving the Hendersonville, Goodlettsville, Gallatin sort of community there. It's right there in Hendersonville. Make sure you swing by Bluegrass Beverages. Sign up for their rewards program, a fantastic liquor store collection in terms of allocation. Also, bourbon, tequila, fantastic collection. They know what they're doing up there. Over 50 years of serving the community. So almost 100 years of serving the Middle Tennessee, Nashville community. Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. And the best brisket in the city, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., Wednesday through Sunday. The official barbecue of the Houston Oilers, PK.
Amen.
There you go. All right. The Harold Landry news, of course, bleeds right into the Abdul Carter evaluation. We've already talked pretty heavily about the foot surgery and being ready for his pro day at the end of March and the shoulder stuff. And is he worth number 1? Is he the best pass rusher in the last 10 years? No. Is he top 10 in the last 10 years? Probably. Does that make him worthy of the number 1 pick? I don't know. It's clearly a position of need. What was your evaluation of Abdul Carter leaving Indianapolis?
Still rated very, very highly by most people that I talked to. Is he, it's kind of like the Hall of Fame thing, like a super undeniable Hall of Famer, Joe Montana, where you stand up if you're presenting Joe Montana and say Joe Montana or Jerry Rice and sit back down. It's unquestionable. Is there a guy that the Titans could feel that way about with the number 1 pick here in the way that there was for Joe Burrow, the way you talked about it with Brian Callahan ultimately, or Myles Garrett, or Trevor Lawrence, who hasn't panned out to be that kind of player, but certainly was
Andrew Luck.
At the end of April in their respective draft years. There is nobody like that for the Tennessee Titans, I don't think, including Abdul Carter. I think he's got a lot of things going for him. I think a stress reaction in the foot is a little bit concerning because stress reactions in the foot, particularly on big men, turn into stress fractures in the foot. And for Rosenhaus to say, oh, in a month, he's fine and he's going to do everything at his pro day, I think is a little flip. I won't be surprised if he doesn't, in fact, do everything or anything at his pro day, which wouldn't dismiss him at all. His film is his film, and he's a terrific college player and prospect. But he also had some soft tissue stuff. He also had a shoulder, and so you start to wonder a little bit about the injury front, which, it, again, doesn't make you run to the podium with the cart. There's some stuff, I think people have some other questions about him that also maybe give you a little bit of pause that I don't know everything about yet, but you hear some rumblings. That's a dangerous thing to say by me.
Yeah.
But
especially since I can't really follow up.
Right. And I understand that. And, maybe that's part of the whole draft game and everything. I don't believe it is. I think there's something there. I don't know that it's the kind of thing that is a stop sign by any means. But I think people doing their thorough investigations of him are doing thorough investigations of him. Let's say that. So I don't know. I still think he's probably the best player in the draft. And that leaves you there. You wish you didn't have any of this injury stuff, first and foremost.
What an awful year to have the first pick.
Yeah. Really
a two-way star that we don't know if he can do it or not. He certainly wants to try, but looks like he's an extraordinary athlete. A defensive end who looks like a really awesome defensive end outside linebacker, but isn't elite relative to the names that have been in that draft slot in the last 10 years. Same with the quarterback. It's just kind of a bummer year to be picking number one, which again is master of the obvious stuff. So. All right, well, we'll keep an eye on that stuff. As to your point, I was listening to Brian Callahan say to us directly, to our faces, Travis Hunter is going to start at corner for us. Like, if that's the direction they go, we would start him at corner is how he would start out. And I'm sitting there reliving that the last couple of days going, I think Brian Callahan doesn't lie about stuff. He's very honest to a fault. Sometimes that could be complete boldface. Like, the point I'm making is it's hard to know what you're supposed to believe.
I think that's true. I mean, I've heard it from others in the organization. I think they view him first and foremost as a cornerback. Now, the thing is, within a couple hours, I listened to Andrew Berry say he's a receiver for the Browns. He's got ball skills, and we want the ball in his hands, and conceivably he could get the ball in his hands 100 times. As a receiver, as opposed to a handful of times as a cornerback. And it's a pretty good case there if you listen to somebody using that logic.
He's a more dynamic Jalen Waddle.
And I talked to Mel Kiper about him the week before the combine, and he said, I would absolutely play him at receiver first for what Mel Kiper's worth. So, it's not a closed deal. I think more people say corner than receiver, but certainly if you want to make the case for receiver, Andrew Berry made it very effectively and very succinctly.
And Travis Hunter was so disciplined in his, I am going to do both things. I mean, I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know, but he was very disciplined about that. Very different level. Here's what's interesting to me, being around them all, very different types of confidence. Travis Hunter, very, very quiet, and I'm just good. Shedeur Sanders, totally different type of personality. Cam Ward, even a little different than that. The intensity is there for Cam Ward.
I put too much in stuff like this. I don't like Cam Ward telling me he lights up a room while he's busy not lighting up a really big room. I mean, it strikes me as false.
What do you know about?
You can't tell me that you're electric while you're not being electric. I don't buy it. And I light up a room when I choose to light up a room, and I'm going to tell you about it. But right now, I've not plugged in the cord, and I'm not going to. You guys aren't worth it.
One of the things that when he was asked, I think you asked him actually about Callahan's system or offense, and he's like, yeah, I had a great meeting, and then all that stuff's very good and fine. But he's like, yeah, just I can't remember the exact words, but he's like, really great offense, a lot of great players. And I was like, you clearly didn't watch the Titans play football.
Or are you just going to say that about anyway?
Right. And again, that's where I'm kind of torn. I see both sides of it. It's like, no, you want to be complimentary. You don't want to say anything inflammatory. Your job is to say the thing and get out. Travis Hunter to a fault almost, right? Or you're just sort of like, okay, I don't really know if I can believe anything you're saying. So sometimes I get torn on which one it should be because, you got to try to put yourselves in their shoes. You're 22 years old, whatever. You're trying to make this could be one of the biggest 15 minutes of your life. If you screw it up, it means absolutely nothing if you don't, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And like I said, I tend to overread these things, but I tend to think if in your 15 minutes there for which you've been trained, if we don't see a glimmer of what if there's not some overlap into the way you're behaving in those 15 minutes and in your 18-minute sessions with teams, I'm surprised. And so I think the way you carry yourself with us is somewhat the way you carry yourself with the teams. And so don't pronounce yourself electric if you're not electric. It's pretty simple formula for me. Like, don't say you're something that you're not. That's disingenuous. I don't want a disingenuous guy in leading my huddle.
Other liquor stores cannot say that they are the liquor store of the year in Nashville because that would be disingenuous. Sinkers is the 4-time liquor store of the year because it's a fact. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue as well. All right, we're going to talk Titans radio real fast in just a second, but I want you to hear, this is about a minute and a half here with Jeremy Fowler. I asked him, ESPN reporter, I've known him for a long time. I just said, hey, man, like what is the perception of the Tennessee Titans organization through all the offseason chaos and turmoil and where they are now? Like, what is the perception of the organization? And this is what he had to say.
I mean, I can't say the perception has been great based on the turmoil of the last few years. I mean, there's been a lot of change. They just fired a GM after 2 years. That's never a good thing. But if the Titans felt like they had to be proactive and that it's going to lead to a stronger team in 2 to 3 years, then, they feel like that had to be done. It's hard to question that too. So, but there's been a lot of upheaval and people trying to make sense of that. But I think the new brain trust they have is very well respected with Mike Borgonzi, who's been with the Chiefs 15 plus years, knows what it takes to win, knows what a good roster looks like. So there's a feeling like they have the right people. But then now you have Brian Callahan in here who had a tough situation with a bad roster last year. And now they have a new GM, and they're not on the same timelines. That sort of is a new trend now. Like when a GM and head coach are on different timelines, what does that mean? Because they didn't come in together. Are they really synced up? I think they can be, certainly. And Brian Callahan's a really respected coach, and I think that will all shake out. But it's interesting. They're in a inflection point, it seems like, and it's clear that they're in sort of a mini rebuild, but have to win enough to stay respectable. So it's like, what path do they take? That's why them trading back in the first pick, if they can, I think is a realistic option for them because they just need to get more draft picks. They need more pass rushers. They're pretty empty there right now. They're going to need more in the back end. They need another guard. It's clearly need a quarterback.
A lot of things.
A lot of things.
Yeah.
All right, Jeremy Fowler there, and I'm not suggesting that what Jeremy Fowler says is like the end-all be-all, but I wanted to play that clip because what he said is representative of the conversations I had with everybody, which is what's going on? What's your perception of the Titans? And a lot of folks are saying, I don't know what to think. There's a lot of chaos. I don't know what to make of the last 18 months, but at the same time, almost everybody to a person, and this is the same thing at the Senior Bowl, they said at these two events, but everyone is in place. We like all the people that they have in place now. So it is a kind of a weird, I don't know what they're doing, but I like the people they've got now, kind of, which is a bit of a contradiction, but I don't know. Your thoughts?
Well, we like all the people they have in place now. Well, Chad Brinker was in some degree in place for the last 2 years. So did they like him the last 2 years? I didn't hear them talking about him. So that would have been my follow-up there. But I'm the wrong person to ask on this. I don't care what national people's perception is of the Titans, generally speaking. And I don't want to appear a hypocrite because I did a big podcast with, Mina Kimes and Pete Prisco and Albert Breer. but I'm talking more specifically to them about, draft people and stuff that they have more expertise in how it plugs with the Titans. I don't care what national people think about the Titans because I don't think they have a very good view of it. They're trying to keep a view on 32 teams. And I once had a job where I had to keep a view on 4 teams, and keeping a view on 4 teams is very hard. Yeah. Keeping a view on 32 teams, I think, is impossible.
I do think it can be a useful exercise to understand how you're viewed. I do think that can be useful. Just like, hypothetically, if you have a completely bonkers meeting in the White House, it's helpful to know where you stand. That you can find value in every sort of situation is what I'm getting at here. And honestly, my full conversation with Jeremy was more about reporting. It's on the media show on Lamestream, so it's about what are his goals around free agency and how do you report on the combine. It was more of a reporting conversation, but at the end, I just wanted to ask him about that. And I will say I got that same exact vibe from folks in the know down at the Senior Bowl as well. So I agree with your point on Brinker. Different role, certainly, and Borgonzi is a different decision maker. And you heard him there, and I'm sure you've done the digging on this too. I have I've talked to like more than a dozen people about Mike Borgonzi and have not heard a single person raise a single concern. It doesn't mean he's going to be great, but I've not heard a single concern about him.
What did they say 6 weeks into Rand Carthon? That's my question. And I would have gotten a lot of the same on the record quotes.
On the record, I agree with you, but you know full well that off the record, that was not what we were hearing. So there you go. All right. Make sure you check out the whole interview. The whole video will be up on the YouTube page, 440 Sports, and you can go listen to Lamestream Sports as well with a conversation with Jeremy. Just a short one, about 10 minutes, so go check that out. Always interesting to talk to reporters and what they're trying to accomplish at these events as well. All right. You put a couple of nuggets into a story, paulkuharsky.com, about the future of Titans radio replacing Mike Keith. I'll agree with you on a few things, and that is Dave McGinnis is not going anywhere.
Yeah, Dave McGinnis is back. They're not turning the whole thing over at once. Smart move, I think, in terms of fans get attached to these guys and with good cause. Dave was front and center at their table at Radio Row with Ramon Foster and Rhett Bryan and Amy Wells. I think that the one thing I wanted to make clear is because I had repeated this and it seemed legitimate on like a industry job board. Somebody had listed, prerequisites for the job as if they had talked or gotten it from the Titans, 3 years play-by-play in the NFL or major college football or whatever. None of that came from the Titans. So there is nothing official that has come from the Titans in terms of prerequisites for the play-by-play job. Now, they may have parameters like that, but some people that I thought were out of it based on those parameters, like Jonathan Hutton or Kevin Ingram, are not necessarily eliminated based on parameters that were falsely out there. So I don't know if those guys have a chance at that job or not, but the idea that I thought they didn't because of those parameters is out the window because those parameters were not legit.
I think the Titans have and I said this before, and I say it even more convicted now. I think the Titans have two large strategies that they could go down with replacing Mike Keith. And I do feel like you could spend big on a big name that parachutes in on Sundays and that you maximize Sundays 3-hour window with the best quality, highest quality, premier national level talent. It's going to cost you a ton of money. And that person is not going to deliver much else from Monday to Saturday. You could do the thing you did with Mike Keith, which is train a guy, coach a guy, get a super talented person who is very qualified, but not yet there all the way. But he's going to be an ambassador of your product every single day, every single place he goes. MCs, events, and caravans, and fan things, and charity events, and podcasts, and coaches shows, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even hostage videos with the owner occasionally. And so I think the third path is down the middle where you get somebody very good on Sundays, but also has some institutional knowledge, some knowledge of the community, some relationship with the fans. That person is harder to find. And I have a feeling that the organization values that quality relationship that Mike Keith had built through all of his other non-Sunday work over the years that he did it. And the question is can you get a good enough Sunday broadcaster that also has all the other stuff that they do want? They do want what Mike Keith brought from a connected tissue standpoint with the audience and with the fans. Hard to find. Very, very hard to find.
So I don't think that person could start from zero. That's why I'm a proponent of hiring Rhett Bryant if they can, and I don't see why they couldn't, as that kind of weekly person who could do Rotary clubs and stuff like that. Because Rhett Bryant's been at every Titans game in some way, shape, or form for Titans radio, and so he can tell the stories and connect with people over their favorite Titans moment and navigate the complaints, I think, in a Mike Keithish way. He's not Mike Keith, obviously, and he'd be the first one to tell you that. But he's got some of the charm and all of that. And I think is with Mike a lot to understand how to handle all of that. But this parachutist on Sunday, what is he doing the rest of the week? Like if he's a play-by-play guy for something else or whatever, how is he? Is he ditching his NBA job on Sunday? He's a college football guy who's doing pro football on Sunday? I don't like the disconnected feeling about this guy who's going to just do play-by-play.
I don't think that's what they're going to do. I don't think they hire that guy because you're spending a huge amount of money for somebody who that's just not going to, they're not interested. The person of that caliber is not interested in doing all that other stuff from Monday to Saturday. The Jim Nances of the world, the Sean McDonoughs of the world, like that person is not interested in doing those things. The grind and the retail politics that it takes to sort of do what is very good about Rhett Bryant. Like Hutton is interesting to me because, and you and I both know him very well, like he is not a polished on the game sort of broadcaster. He's done a lot of high school football, but he would be almost perfect everywhere else. He MCs events. He does charity work. He has institutional knowledge. He's been on the Titans radio broadcast for years. He would check every box except for high-level Sunday broadcast ability. I think you can.
But I think what he'd like to do most is the play-by-play stuff. And I think what he'd probably like to do least is cover for Amy Adams Strunk on a Wednesday when people are legitimately bitching about her.
No, I agree. He's been on this side of the street for a long time. I'm with you on that. I do think that they value both. I agree with you. Rhett could do a wonderful job at all that other stuff. The question is,
he's not a play-by-play guy, by the way.
But he's not a play-by-play guy. So I look, they are. This goes without saying. Replacing Mike Keith was going to be impossible no matter what. Just you cannot find that person especially at that time of the organization's existence, coming into a new state with the way they did when the NFL wasn't as big as it is today. Even it just is. They just got so lucky with that.
They
guy.
Killed it. Yeah,
they got so lucky, and Keith is great, and the whole spiel. So it'll be fascinating. I was under the impression about I don't know about you in terms of timing of this. I don't think they're very close to narrowing it down.
No. I don't think they've even decided, like we're talking about, what these jobs are. They haven't decided.
Yeah. They had from what I understood, I was told they had over 100 people apply, and that they are going back and like looking at reels, like the way ESPN would do or any other big time broadcast company, because these teams are broadcast companies now. I was talking to one of the people in sort of the broadcast side of things for the Titans. There's like 12 people on staff that run their entire production department. It's a whole company. I mean, that's every team is like this, college and pro.
Yeah, I think they ought to do some reassessing of that as part of this. I don't know that they will. This person's just going to come into that.
Go further.
Well, it's a cheerleading department for most franchises to a degree, and I think when you're coming off a 3-win season, it might be worth evaluating how much of it is styled for the owner and how much of it is styled for the fans.
Is that like a Preds Twitter account that's like intermission 4-0 Rangers with like a social media graphic, and you're like end of 2 ! And you're like down by 4 goals.
I can't pretend to listen to all of it. I listen to a lot of people tell me about all of it.
Yeah.
And I think they could serve the fans in a way that is less more genuine. I know that.
I got Jimmy Wyatt. I got Jimmy Wyatt writing stories, right?
I think they could serve the fans in a way that's more genuine.
I hear you. I understand, I guess, in my perspective, maybe I'm not like the youngest person on the beat at all, but it's state-run radio, and I understand that some folks at some points during their week want some state-run radio.
I think there are different ways to do state-run radio, and I don't know
That's
that they've done much consideration of what those levels are.
I guess I'm thinking like the hype stuff, like, hey, this player looked great in camp, or this rookie's got this cool backstory, like that kind of stuff. You can only get from inside the team access standpoint. And some of that stuff fans just want to consume in one ear and out the other and be like, oh, that's cool. What a cool uniform, or what a cool play that was. Or, I think there is space in your diet for kind of all of it. And I agree with you. It could be done differently.
What's the coach's show on a Monday after you lose by 40?
You got to have some personality on that show. That's for sure. I used to do those Preds shows with the players, and they'd be like coming off 3 losses, and you're just like, hey, guys. And they're like, hi. It's hard to do. It's not easy to do when you
it's hard to do if you're trying to do it a certain way. It's harder to do.
That's true.
So pick a lane that maybe isn't as hard to do.
Last thing to consider here, whether you go big on a big name that parachutes in versus a I don't want to say a smaller name, but that's how it feels.
I think there's only, what you're saying, big name. There's only so big a name that you can get to parachute in. Those big names have full-time jobs.
Yeah, Jim Nantz lives here though. You could just drive over.
It works for CBS Sports. It's doing the game of the week.
You think you just drive over
the Titans game?
Yeah, way bigger game. Here's the other thing. I don't think that Dave McGinnis is long for the job, though.
No.
I think you got to look at him as a 3 to 5 year thing. And if you're going to overlap him with the new play-by-play person, I think you need to be planning two moves ahead, which is, what does the whole new booth look like in 3 to 5 years?
How about finally having a former player who is eloquent and, a legitimate Mr. Titan? When's the last one that came out of that team? I'm asking. Most teams don't have trouble finding one. This team found one, and unfortunately fell victim to CTE and had a short career. And second and third, they got a damn Pittsburgh Steeler.
I mean, there's a few other former players in the market. I don't know.
Yeah, and they're terrific.
Stop it. All right.
Honestly or not? Did you want me here to be?
No, I don't want fluff. I don't want smoke. I'm here.
There hasn't been a good Titans player on the air here besides Frank Wycheck that I can recall.
Well, and broadcasting a game is also very, very different than any other type of content.
Right. It's harder.
It's much harder.
It's harder than just getting on the air unprepared for 3 hours and talk.
Coach Mack is very talented and has played a great role.
Coach Mack is a former coach, not a former player.
I hear you. All right. Okay. Thank you to Paul Kuharsky for hanging out and being as authentic and as genuine as you always are. That's why we work together, and I appreciate that. Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, and of course, also make sure you check out paulkuharsky.com. Yeah, go ahead.
Parting thought. I'm wearing a T-shirt, which I'm against, but you can wear a branded T-shirt that is pushing your product. So don't block the box is my slogan. You're wearing Sinkers. It's a collared shirt. That's the requirement. I wear a collared shirt almost every time, but I'm wearing a T-shirt, but it's promoting my product. That's the only reason I'm wearing a T-shirt. All right, we got to get out of here.
All right, bye. We got to we're going to go tour the stadium and have a good time. We'll have some videos and stuff for you on Thursday's episode, paulkuharsky.com as well. Thumbs up, notifications, rate, review, subscribe, all that great stuff. For PK, I'm Braden. Thanks for listening. Mondays, 1 o'clock, starting next week, we are back to our normal time slot. Peace and love, everybody.